This podcast represents the opinions of our hosts and guests. The content here should not be taken as medical advice and is for informational purposes only. This podcast also does not establish a standard of care, doctor-patient, or client relationship. No guarantee is given regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on the podcast or website. And because each person is so unique, all listeners are encouraged to connect with counseling and medical professionals for assistance with their personal journey. All people, places, and scenarios mentioned in the podcast have been changed to protect the privacy of those involved.
Welcome to We're Not Fine. I'm Dr. Talia Jackson.
And I'm Doug Jensen. We thank you for listening every week to our deep and thought-provoking conversations about relationships.
Are you ready?
We're so ready.
We're so ready. So first of all, we need to acknowledge how we're in this new studio together. We've had so many audio-visual issues, and we have our sign that represents the name of this podcast. And you and I get to sit next to each other now.
Which is so much fun. We did sit next to each other last time, except I was looking at Doug the entire time, and Doug was looking into the camera. So I had to lean in closer and closer. It was a little weird.
And I did not do that.
So you are our very first guest in this set, which is why I was a little getting here.
And so for all our listeners and viewers, we so welcome Melissa Rogers. Yay. And I want to start by saying how bizarre it is that you and I actually connected the first time.
This actually is a very bizarre story.
It's a very bizarre story. And the funny thing is, as you and I talked about it, though, we had more in common than we ever thought. So, like, I went to the emergency room in Hudson, Wisconsin with a jiu-jitsu injury to my eye. And the nurse that was taking care of me referenced you, put us in contact together on Instagram because she was saying, you know what, this person would be perfect for your relationship podcast, right? And so you and I connected on Instagram a long time ago. And the funny thing is, like, and so I knew you were going to be on the show at some point. So I'm so glad we finally made it happen. But I also want to say, like, at the end of the day, like, you knew this person from the Dairy Queen in Wisconsin, I think.
Yes, right? From high school, my very first job ever. And she was in a grade below me, and I feel like that's back in the time where anybody in a different grade, like they weren't part of your circle. It was so weird. Right. And so we worked together, and I remember I thought she was so cool and so fun. I'm like, oh my gosh, this younger girl is actually really cool.
And at the time, it was like so much younger, I'm sure. I remember in high school that I actually didn't know the name of a single person in the grade below me, but I knew every one of the upperclassmen.
Yeah, I mean, she was basically a zygote, so I was like, whatever.
Oh my God, a zygote.
And of course, I found out in that process that you've also trained jiu-jitsu. So we have so
I've
much
also
in common.
sustained a jiu-jitsu injury, so I love it.
You guys are practically twins.
Yeah, you had a bad one, though. Yours was much worse than my eye.
I don't know. If something happened to my eye, like, you know, the face is my moneymaker, right? Like, everything else, like...
Yeah,
of course it is.
Yeah, like, I tore my MCL, so, like, yeah, did it suck not to walk for a while? Sure. But like, if something happened to my face, I would have been absolutely just horrified.
Hopefully you can't see my eye injury anymore.
Can I formally introduce this lovely young woman?
I would be delighted if you did.
All right.
And I get to watch you as you do it.
Melissa Rogers, that you are a proud Texas transplant. And I love, you're a Midwest girl, at heart, growing up in Chicago, finishing high school in Wisconsin, and excitedly donning maroon and gold as a Minnesota Gopher in Minneapolis. Mm-hmm. Love that.
I do too.
Love that. So you're still our peeps. After her, I love this, Tour de Midwest. It's so French.
Yeah, I like to make it seem chic.
It was so chic because, you know, the Midwest is not that chic. So if you add a de, that like really makes it go up 12 notches in coolness. That you set your sights on her dream city of New York City, which is a dream city. After a few years enjoying Manhattan life, you slowed down and got to enjoy time as a Georgia peach in the gorgeous storybook-like scenery of Savannah, Georgia, which I have heard is really glorious.
I'm going to be there in a couple weeks.
Now in El Paso.
Yeah.
Quite as picturesque.
Isn't it? I mean, I'm feeling like maybe some strip malls and some, what are those called? Dust Bunnies, no. They're called
Yes,
tumbleweeds.
no, you're thinking of tumbleweeds. We definitely have
that's
dust
what I'm
storms.
picturing.
There are plenty of
Yes.
strip malls, but El Paso is really a lovely place, so please come visit.
I absolutely, I'd love to.
I've been.
Maybe. I've not, I've never
It's
been.
an
That's right.
academic. It's an academic community too, right?
That's true, yeah.
But I feel like you have literally been everywhere, which only makes it more interesting to talk
I
to
agree.
you about being a matchmaker, because I'm so curious, and we can kind of dive in later to their spots for us to kind
Yeah,
of chat
let's
about
dive.
it. But like what dating looks like in other places, what people feel like in different places. It says you love working with clients locally, nationwide, and can understand cultural nuances and the unique voices coming from any region and any market. Dying to hear all about that. Of course you're creative, and of course you have an outgoing personality, and of course you have a background in psychology. I mean,
Of course
when you're
I
not
do.
working, we can find you on the tennis court and the golf course.
Love it.
And if you are not on the premises of Coronado Country Club, then you're
My
at
second
home with
home.
2 daughters and your adorable pit bull, Yoni. That is
Oh.
so funny to me on so many levels,
Yeah.
because it's either Yoni as like a Jewish name
Oh my.
from Yonatan, or it's
You
like,
nailed it, actually.
Really?
are you
He's
Jewish?
named out. So I like to call myself secular, right? Where I've had a bat mitzvah, I've had a confirmation, so I'm just like honestly covered in the happenstance of the end of the world. But my ex-husband thought that Jonathan Netanyahu was the greatest soldier of all time. So Yanni is named after Jonathan Netanyahu.
I don't
love
even
it.
know what to say. It's so cute. I should have sniffed out my people a long time ago. Maybe I should have been cued in when the first thing she said when we hopped on was
Shalom.
shalom.
That's true. But also this is Yanni right here. That's my dog.
Oh,
So cute.
welcome, Yanni.
Oh my god, it's so cute. We have these fabulous questions that we're going to dive into,
I can't wait.
and we did change a couple things around that we decided we were a little more interested in, or we fine-tuned.
I don't know.
today.
Well, we have a general guide. We're very interested in this. And, honestly, in some ways, Melissa, what we need to start with is like, what got you interested in matchmaking? What got you interested in the dating events that you did? One of the things when you and I first chatted about being on this podcast, you talked about sometimes feeling like an imposter in this role as well. I'm just very curious about your role and how you got there and how you feel about it.
So, great questions. It is something where imposter syndrome is the first thing you feel, because everybody or most people are familiar with the OG, Patty Stanger, Millionaire Matchmaker.
Absolutely.
I remember seeing those shows and thinking, what a cool job, but also like, oh my God, she is, can I say like a swear word? Like, I just think,
Gotch.
yes,
that what it was? She was
I was
so
like, she's
neat.
such a bee. But however, it's like then once you start working, you're just like, I totally get it, Patty. I understand every word you just said. But
Well,
yeah,
tell me more
so
about that. Why? Because like she got so sick of people's bullshit that she started
Bingo.
shaming them into being better dates.
right. So it's like my goal is never to shame someone, but it is also to say, guess what? You pay me for my professional opinion. You don't pay me to blow smoke up your ass. And
kind of
that's
what
the
we
long
do.
and the short of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. And also, like, you're paying me to get this show on the road. And if I see obvious reasons why you're not having success, let me tell you, start brushing your teeth. That was like,
Yeah.
That's correct. Yeah. I've
So you
never
kind
had
of-
to tell someone that though.
You kind of got stimulated from Patty. Tell us more.
Yes. So you had asked just kind of what brought me into being a matchmaker. And the truth is, I knew I wasn't meant for a typical job. Like, I guess some people say neurotypical, but I just knew that working in an office, something 9 to 5, something corporate, not going to be for me.
Yeah.
And at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities, they have an incredible psychology program. They have an incredible
I
human
went to
sexuality program. Oh, well, that's why you're so good at what you do. So I loved the focus on human sexuality, and it was it felt taboo still, because what was this, like 2005, 2006, when I was just like, oh my gosh, like, can I even really study this? But either way, so I wanted to get out of my current role, which was I was working with adults with personality disorders, which was great when they were happy, and it was absolutely terrible and like sad and scary when they weren't happy. And I'm such an empath, like I just couldn't do it. But yeah, so I found a company that was hiring for matchmakers, and I applied thinking, well, this is obviously a scam. They're going to steal my information, but if it's true, it would be really cool. And here I am, like about a decade later, and I'm just really thrilled that luckily I have been able to step out of imposter syndrome because, you know, after a while, it's like you can't just like, you have to acknowledge your strengths, right? And I'm really good at telling people exactly why they can't only ask for men over 6 foot tall, you know?
Oh my gosh, Melissa, I love that so much. And also, like, I feel like anyone can relate to the whole imposter syndrome, but I feel like especially in our career as well, I remember feeling the same thing. Like, well, what do I know? And what you don't realize when you start in a profession like this is that it takes time to build the confidence in your own intuitive knowing of how to move forward. And we have all of the resources and all of the science behind it. I'm sure we can't wait to talk to you about all of the tools and assessments that you use. So there are like science backed ways of figuring out if there might be chemistry, but a lot of what we do is gut and it's intuition.
Yes, the CEO of my company will laugh because I remember when she and I were doing an interview, I was like, I hate this word, but at the end of the day, I joke that I'm a vibe scientist, you know? Like, I got to read the vibes. This is my science.
I'm obsessed with that. I love it.
And Melissa, you also got into dating, right? Mm-hmm. The dating services. Yes. Tell us more about that as well.
Well, you know what? Long story short, I also went through a divorce. And so it's very interesting how I truly think that me going through a divorce and having to re-navigate the dating world in an arena that I hadn't previously been in. I never had to use the apps or anything like that. And so actually being the boots on the ground, literally and figuratively, has made me such a better matchmaker. And also, you know, I think I work better with both, you know, never been married clients and divorced clients, because sometimes people who've never been married are like, oh, I don't want somebody who's been divorced. Sounds like they have baggage. And I'm like, honey, of course you want somebody who's been divorced. It means they've probably been to therapy.
Some training.
Oh my God. It means they've probably been to therapy. And it also means that they've been able to, in the past, commit to something, which I think is a great...
Does it mean they committed?
You know what's...
They got a divorce?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, that's the thing is, like, marriage is a commitment. It's not a feeling. So I can see where a lot of people will say that. And I'm not poo-pooing what you just said, but it's like... everyone can kind of commit to a couple of years with somebody, right? Because like it's not even that much different than like I want to break up. We've been together for 5 years or something.
However, I mean, yes, totally 100%. And most people are complaining that in the dating world, nobody is wanting to commit to anything. So at least if someone's been divorced, it has meant that they've said yes to a commitment once.
Right. I respect your reasoning. I do.
Yeah, I'm being with you, Melissa. I think a lot of people don't know what they want, which I'm kind of eager to hear about in the matchmaking process.
Yeah.
I think people are really confused sometimes. Go ahead.
I agree. I think that the best way I can explain it is I'm not a chef who creates any dish that you could possibly dream up. I'm more like the server at the restaurant. Like, you can tell me these are the ingredients you absolutely love and like they must be in your dish. And you can tell me these are the ingredients I'm allergic to, cannot handle them. And then I can be like, all right, well, here are 3 dishes on the menu. This one has onions. You said you don't love onions, but they weren't a deal breaker.
Oh my God.
So it's like, I can show you what's available to you, but is it going to be exactly, you know, what you wanted all the time? No. Is it going to be fucking delicious? Probably. You know?
Oh my gosh. Do you find that by the time people make it to you for matchmaking services, they've completely fatigued from the apps? Or do you find that like who comes to you for matchmaking versus trying on their own?
So you're absolutely right. People have app fatigue. And I believe Doug and I talked about this where you want a culture of abundance absolutely everywhere in the world, like bank account, abundant baby, like time off, abundant. And then you get on an app and you see someone who like, maybe their eyebrows don't look the way you like swipe left, like, oh, this person, that's a weird first photo, swipe left. So it's like you have this culture of abundance, but like really all these people you're swiping right on, how many like you back, So I think they're fatigued with the fact that it feels abundant, but it's not. And then most of my clients, or almost all of them, are, professionals who have made a name for themselves. They sometimes just don't want to be seen on the dating apps, or they're tired of the dating apps, or they're just like, I'm so busy. I need to outsource this at this point. Like clearly I have a blind spot.
Yeah. I mean, I really respect that when people know that, okay, you know what, I could do this. I could mow my own lawn and weed all my stuff, which I do. Actually, my son does. And we should be outsourcing more things than we are. But I really respect it when people value their time and say, I could do this for a really long time poorly, or I could hire a professional to do it really well, and it will probably take a quarter of the time.
Right. And I think you hit the nail on the head when you said we should be outsourcing more things. Like I actually hate doing laundry, and I had to realize that. Like I'm not good at it. I don't want to be good at it. I would rather just have my clean laundry. So it's the same like with a matchmaker. Clearly, I'm not choosing the right people who value me and my skill set, or even know how to speak my own love language. So hey, you help me out, other third party, neutral third party.
Oh my gosh. Another question about, so you've got the matchmaking. So people come in for matchmaking, but then you also have your dating events. And it was like my favorite name ever. Let's fucking go. So what are, like, who should do the matchmaking? Who should do the events? Tell us a little bit about the differences.
So honestly, they're not really tied together for me because the majority of my clients are not local to me, and I do my dating events locally. And it's really not even mine, right? I work with this fabulous bar called Capri right here in El Paso. They're like this adorable coffee shop during the day, turn little cocktail bar in the evening. And the idea is like, let's just put conversation back into dating instead of the swiping and all that stuff. But also just like being IRL, because I'm sure we have all been there where you meet somebody like on an app or something, their photos decent, their texting style decent, and then like within 2 seconds you're like, God, I need to leave. I can't do this. Like there are zero vibes.
Yeah. The chemistry, if that isn't there, or all you need is 2 seconds of
energy doesn't lie. It doesn't.
That's right.
And I also think that a lot of the things are so contrived, right? So on a dating app, what are people saying? Hey, how are you? I don't care how you are. I don't know you. You know what I mean? Like, it's the last question I want to ask. So what I've done with the events is I've created a bingo card. And my rule is that you have to get every square signed by somebody different. So you can't just sit and talk to one person. And you also have to talk to men and women. So that way, when you walk up to someone, it's not automatically just like, oh, this person's obviously into me. This is awkward. I don't even want to have this conversation. No, like, sit down. They just want to get their square signed. Maybe they'll fall in love with you in the meantime, but like, take the pressure out.
Wait,
Absolutely.
so like straight men and straight women, you would still want them to, like, a woman to talk to a woman and a man to talk to a man? Because it's like building conversation and connection and skills.
Absolutely. I think it's not even necessarily just like people talking skills, because most people have a profession in which they have to pretend like they're outgoing at some point during their day. However, I think that there is a lost art in making conversation with people that we don't know. Because now we go to a bar, like we're alone, we just like pick up our cell phone and we text our bestie the entire time. And so we don't have the need to create social interaction the way we used to. But it's also one of the most exciting things is to connect with somebody new. And you're like, oh my God, you really are funny. I had a nice time chatting with you. And whether that's a male or a female, whether it's somebody I want to get with or not, I think that's also just like a huge bonus.
It's a win-win.
So the bingo cards, they are actually like you have to find somebody who meets the qualification for that square?
Yes, exactly.
Say more. And you developed this yourself?
So a few of my colleagues have done bingo at like events in the past. And since this isn't really like work for me and it's just more of a social thing, I make the bingo questions a little bit more fun. Like, you know, find somebody who has a hidden piercing, or, you know, we don't even have to do that. Like, you know, find somebody who like doesn't believe in ghosts. And Doug and I definitely talked about this, where I am on the border in El Paso, Texas, right next to a lot of like Mexican Catholics, and like the running joke that everybody gets is like, I could like walk up to you and shoot you directly in the face. But then if somebody goes, "Oh no, I swear to God, a ghost did it," they'd be like, "Oh, ay Dios mío, it's true." Like, you know, so everybody believes in ghosts here, which is why, depending on the area, I think it's really important to like, specialize the card, right?
I love it.
So in Minneapolis, I would write, find somebody who did not attend the U of M. You know?
Right. Or find me someone who does not hunt or something.
Right. Yeah, that would be a perfect one. Find somebody who's never been hunting. Find somebody whose elementary school did not let them take the weekend off for opening weekend.
I mean, that's probably more small town rustic.
It might be.
Tell us a little bit. Oh my God, it's so much fun talking to her. She's so amazing. Tell us a little bit about how people engage with matchmaking services, like pre-first marriage, post. Like you were saying a little bit about like someone who's never been married, someone who has been married, maybe someone who's widowed, like different stages of their lives. What do you notice? What do you find?
I love that you mentioned someone widowed, because I can recall my very first client who had been widowed. I was so nervous to tell people like, "Oh yeah, he's been widowed." You know, it almost feels like better to be like, "Oh, he's been divorced. Don't worry, they hated each other." But instead, it's like they were so in love. And so I loved being able to sell it, in that he explained it like having kids, right? You don't love one kid less just because you're, you know, going to have another one. You find room to spread the love. So I actually find people who've been widowed and they're coming at this from like this beautiful experience. They're nervous because they don't want to, you know, take anything away from their previous marriage, but they're also like ready to find love again. I think that people who have never been married and never had kids, their wants sometimes can seem very, what's the word I'm looking for? They can seem very narrow and short-sighted.
Because they don't know.
That's right.
Maybe they don't appreciate that humans are very multifaceted, and they might not know.
That's
exactly
very true. And so a big thing that I believe it's my job to do is to present, you know, a situation to be like, all right, well, let's consider you meet this person of your dreams. They are absolutely physically attractive to you. They're making you laugh. Like, they make you feel safe. I think that's the most important thing to feel when you're on a date. Like, do you feel safe? Do you feel awkward? Whatever. But it's like, if they're making you laugh, if you're attracted to them, if you feel safe, you know, it's like, what if you found out that he actually had been married for 2 years, and, you know, maybe his ex-wife had some addiction issues that he wasn't aware of? I think that, you know, people who have been divorced and would like to start dating again, like, they're freaking saints, because if you've been through a full-on divorce, like, that's a lot. But
going back into the fire. Yeah.
But they also realize that you're in a restaurant and you're picking from dishes on the menu. You're not just creating a whole new dish.
I wonder if that makes it a little easier for people, because they don't have to create a dish with 5,000 ingredients, because that won't exist.
Yeah.
They just sort of sniff around and see what the dishes that are actually made feel like.
But then here, if we're really leaning into this metaphor, another challenge with people who, like, maybe in their early 40s, late 30s, whatever, even 50s, 60s, sometimes they're just like, I'll skip dinner if this is all that they're offering. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes they're just like, I'm single because I haven't met anybody yet who makes me want to not be single. I think that something really lovely I found in the post-divorce life is, like, I love having my own space and I love nobody else being in it.
Yeah.
And so a
Which is
huge
legit.
a huge thought process of the people who have been married before is like, if they're not amazing, like I'm just not going to settle for anything.
We talk about this a lot on this podcast.
Yeah.
I want to say two things. Number one, we're going to have an episode dedicated to dating when widowed. A dear friend of mine lost her husband last year, and I cannot wait to do that with her. She's not quite ready to do it yet. Because we're going to do an episode first on kind of how her whole life has changed, which kind of goes back to something when someone, for example, in a widowed situation, like your whole circumstances, if you have kids, the availability that you have, the time that you have, especially, depending on how old your kids are. There's so many factors involved in all of this. But one of the things I love that you just did is that you talked about like the benefits of being single as well. A lot of us, including myself, have chosen it too. Do I think that there could be someone who changes that if the right person came along? Very possibly. But I also think that and I'm very curious about two other questions related to what you just said. Number one, we talked a little bit about the heterosexual piece of this. Do you also work with the LGBTQ community? And then secondly, the issue of like people who might want open or ethically non-monogamous or polyamorous. Do you accommodate those people as well?
Do they even
Absolutely.
do matchmaking?
Yeah. So I actually was a little bit shocked because speaking of imposter syndrome, the very first client I was ever given, they were like, all right, Melissa, this is your first client. Welcome to Matchmaker World. She was like an older or a later in life lesbian, And I was like, what? Are you sure? Like, are you sure Joaquin Phoenix did? Like, what is happening? Like, this is a challenge, I don't have to earn a paycheck here. But yeah, so also I've been really, really lucky to start working with people who have been, heterosexual when we started. And then, after conversations, I just had a conversation on Thursday with a client who's like, you know what? I'm trying to be more open and I really think I shouldn't waste time and I should use, our time together to explore, dating women or dating men or just kind of looking at all sides of the coin. So, I think that's really been a pleasure of mine is to help people feel comfortable enough in their skin and confident enough in dating that they're like, all right, never dated a woman before. Here I go. Let's see what happens.
I can't think of a better place to explore that. And it also feels like you're there for guidance and coaching. And so, so what Doug was asking previously, just about this idea of, do you find that people that come to you are mostly looking for committed monogamous relationships, or are people also wondering about, ethically non-monogamous, open?
I mean, we really get a little bit of everything. I would say the majority of people are looking for monogamous. But if somebody tells me they're open to polyamory, then that just opens up more doors. It might be harder to find a match. And pardon me, I shouldn't say harder. I may have to get more creative finding a match for somebody who's openly polyamorous. But I believe there's a lid for every pot. And I also believe that, life after divorce, polyamory doesn't seem so bad, right? You get to have your space and, you get to have your cake and eat it too.
I've been thinking a lot about that myself.
It's like a dream come true, I think, when people can come to you and know what they're looking for, which might be different than what they think they should be looking for, but just to really be honest with themselves about who they are and what they're wanting.
Melissa, the other thing that's really clear to me is that you are incredibly receptive to kind of whatever comes in front of you, and that safety in this process. I know that people who probably engage in the matchmaking process or who have hired services for dating before, there's an anxiety about that. Like, going in and being able to talk about those things and having somebody say, I might want to start dating women as well as a bisexual person or whatnot. I love the safety that you create. I love the welcoming space that you create. It feels really important in any situation that people have that safety. You mentioned that in the actual date itself. Go ahead. Yeah, really nice work. Like, you talk so beautifully about it.
You're so kind. And you know what? I think that is another big part of my job is that we are all able to go on an app and get dates. Every single one of us, whether they're the ones we really want or not, whatever. Yeah. So I think it's very important to be receptive enough and to honor their preferences enough to where I'm not wasting their time. I'm a big proponent of saying it has to be win-win-win, right? The client has to win, I have to win, and the company has to win. And if anybody's not winning in that, if anybody's not winning, then I'm just a crappy matchmaker. I would not ever put you with the person of your dreams knowing that you wouldn't fulfill their hopes and dreams and needs.
What assessments are your favorite to use to see who people are? Is it love languages? If they might be compatible with
To
others?
make a match.
How do you do it?
So I think all the assessments are so fun, right? But it's kind of like an astrological sign where some people are like, oh my God, I am the most Pisces of all Pisces. You could never out Pisces me. And there are other people who are like, are you kidding me? Enneagram is the only way to go. I'm a 2-wing 3, duh. And then there's the Myers-Briggs people. And I think that's actually more of it's more of a peek into what generation you fall into than it is into who you are. Like I can only get so much out of those because of the fact that we are so deeply layered. Like somebody who might have a Myers-Briggs that says they're an introvert, they're like the most extroverted person around their family. So a lot of the tests are a little bit more generalized to who you are outwardly versus who you are inwardly. Does that make sense?
Of course, yeah.
You're like, no.
And the Enneagram is an inward thing too. You should, Enneagram, I agree with people that say that Enneagram really does nail it on the head. But I feel like what you're saying is people are just multifaceted diamonds and the assessments are just too general to work.
That's correct. Because there have been people who are like, I will never date a Capricorn. Or even people who say like, I would never date somebody who's in tech or an engineer. And it's like, the more you want to give yourself like boundaries and like hard lines, the more you're going to find that maybe you need to open it up a little bit.
Oh, I couldn't agree more.
Absolutely.
I'm really curious about how, if you're finding somebody showing up looking for all sorts of ingredients, right? And then you are maybe looking at them a little bit and you're like, sweetheart, you're not exactly a peach yourself. How do you have that conversation with them about, is there coaching, how they can become more dateable? What do you do?
That's a great question. And I think that, once again, there's a lid for every pot, right? And I think something that is very important to ask people is, if somebody is attracted to like an artist, let's just use this example where they're like, I just want somebody like super like creative, ethereal, always feeling, XYZ, say, all right, what do you think they're looking for? What do you think when your perfect partner is out there searching, what do you think they're looking for back? And, that's actually helped a lot of people be like, oh, I guess I see what you're saying. Like, maybe I should work on my this or my that, or, and I get, like, there's always yin and yang, but, if there are too many big, like, glaring red flags, we gotta step back a little bit and see where can we give and take.
Well, and you and I talked about this in our initial conversation, Melissa, like some of the people who have like, they may not exercise, they may not take care of themselves, and they want somebody who's a fitness guru, right? And how do you manage that conversation? But it's part of what that conversation is, right? Like,
it's the same conversation where I think that it's more important now than ever before. Somebody's like, I just really want somebody who's active and fit and taking care of themselves. And most people will say it's fine if they have a few extra pounds. But, if you are coming from, a place in your life where maybe you're not even feeling your best, when people say to me like, oh yeah, I'm 30 pounds heavier than I should be or that I want to be, and then they say, but I'm only attracted to this, that's when I have to bust it out again and say, all right, so I get it. We all have preferences. I think you look amazing right now, but you already admitted you might not feel like your best version of yourself. Right. So your perfect partner, what do you think they're searching for? And would they be attracted to the mindset that you're currently bringing to the table with this extra 30 pounds on your body? And I use that example because I always think like, if I was skinnier, maybe this or maybe that. So I think the mindset that goes behind it is also a huge factor.
I mean, what I love so much about what you just said is you're making people think a little bit about what am I bringing to the table rather
Right.
than what is my perfect person, what's my perfect date. And I really like, and the way that you brought that up was not at all shaming, but it's sort of like, let's hold up a mirror just for a minute and just think about like, what do you think other people coming to us might be looking for and wanting? I really appreciate that.
I do too. And I think, body positivity, et cetera, and I love your comment about there's a lid for every pot, because there is. And, one of the things, so I developed the 4 C's of relationship, and chemistry is the first one of those. And the thing about it is, Melissa, chemistry comes in a variety of forms, and we're all attracted to different people. And you said about energy, but I have so many people who will get on the phone with the person they're trying to date, and if the voice isn't right. So it's really important to just kind of listen to yourself. And I do believe that people should be selective, and I do not think that people should settle, but it's equally important to really get realistic about what are you bringing to this table, and who are you, and who's a good fit for you, and and what's going to be a draw for you. I want to ask too, I'm very curious, Melissa, about how the political climate, for example, one of the things that I hear a lot about from clients is that, they don't want to date a person who voted for this person or that person. The pandemic was obviously a time of big social isolation. So I'm kind of curious about how those factors have come into play in terms of what people say. Are people literally saying, so as a gay man, I'm on this app, right? And, there's a lot of people who are like, if you voted for Trump, I'm out, right? Don't even bother. So I'm just kind of curious what you're finding, because the criteria feels different. Go ahead.
Right. So you make such a good point. There are so many people who want to just start the conversation of politics and say, if this is a very popular one, is saying if they voted for Trump, no, absolute deal breaker. And I just encourage them to remember how short-sighted that is, right? Because there's so much more behind a political decision than just a talking head. And we could get really deep into this subject, but I would say most of the people, I feel like it used pre-2016 or pre-Trump era, I would say.
Yeah.
People would say, you know what, live and let live. I'm Republican and I believe that, my mate can be liberal, Democrat, whatever, as long as they live and let live. And so there was a huge shift of live and let live to oh, hell no, if they voted for Trump, they are not getting near me. And I actually think there are plenty of people who are in this gray area where they're still live and let live, but they're going to be really turned off by somebody who can make an absolution like that. So politically, if I could give people advice, it would be remember that we're all forming our opinions from a perception that we've lived our entire life with. And so instead of saying no and making that blanket statement, cultivate a little bit extra of what else is going on to make them make those decisions.
I also am really curious about just trends in general after reading your bio and all of the places that you've lived. And I don't know all of the places that you've been doing matchmaking versus dating yourself in different cities. And you were mentioning that it's just really different in different cities, the kinds of people that are available to date or what they're looking for. Can you give us some anecdotes? Tell us some stories about who is dating, who's showing up at different places. What are they like?
Okay. Yeah, I can give you some observations, for example.
Yeah.
An observation that I have with successful men, typically in maybe New York City and DC, is that it's going to be a little bit more typical for them to be age 40 and never been married before, which is why I challenged you when you said something so they've never committed. And it's they kind of did commit, probably to their career, and so they were busy working up the ladder, doing a ton of education and whatnot. And then of course, they're gonna party and they're gonna date really cute girls and whatnot. But so once it's time to settle, they can get this this look of oh, this guy's never settled down. I can't believe he's 40 and never been married, when he just had different opportunities available to him, right? And then we have in the Midwest, I think people really are ready to settle down younger, as I think you guys have probably all seen and understood. And then we have, I feel the West Coast is just a total mixed bag. right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, my
and
older
then,
daughter lives in LA, and I swear these people are very career oriented there, like they are in New York City, especially in the film industry, which she's in as well. Very few people are getting married and having kids and whatnot. And that's the other curiosity about all this, like the trends and where, kids are an issue. So when you talk about a dude being 40, which I understand, I think it's Al Pacino who just had a kid at 83.
Something, yeah.
So yeah, but I think those are the factors, right? And I'm guessing there's a lot of people more than ever, given concerns for climate change or given concerns with the political climate, that are not wanting to date people who want kids or otherwise. I mean, I just feel like I'm curious about that trend as well.
yeah, I mean, I would say that's something that happens a lot less often,
Yeah.
where people will have that, like unequivocally, I do not want children. And that presents a huge barrier because a lot of times people just want the option, right? Because nobody ever says, like, well, if I get married and like we're both barren, no big deal, because I think everybody walks into something like high hopes, like, oh, we might fall in love and have a family. And so it's just really hard for people to let go of certain things when somebody does have that vision for their future without children. But I think people are becoming more and more open to it. So that's exciting.
I mean, and I really just love that you are promoting being more open to anything, just sort of knowing yourself and trying out things that you might not have thought you would ever in a million years be interested in, or opening up some doors that were closed previously to just see how it feels and see who's out there.
Yeah, I call it the Bethany Frankel concept, where she says, come from a place of yes. And so I do recommend, you know what? You can give anyone an hour of your time. So if you're on the fence about a date, come from a place of yes, because they might be absolutely phenomenal in person. They might knock your socks off. You might connect in a way that you haven't connected with somebody else and not even expected it. There have been so many different areas of my life, whether it's trying, like the first time I played tennis, I was like, I'm probably going to suck at this. And then I was addicted, right? And so it can come in the form of, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a sport, whatever. I think if you're not coming from a place of yes, then, the only alternative is that you're coming from a place of no. And how attractive does that sound,
Except that, of course, people have, and this is where I always go with this deal breaker conversation, right? Like, there's going to be some of that. And I think people, and this goes back to your comment about like dating after a divorce, or, people my age, which I don't need to disclose, but it's obvious I'm not 20. But there's a part of this where you get to know yourself and you kind of know what you're willing to do and not to do. And even you talk about like the space, I would have a very hard time sharing my space as well. So, I mean, I think, Melissa, as we kind of get older and we get more educated and we get more experience in this life, I think there's a really big opportunity to take a look at all of those pieces. So people will know some of that, but that openness is great. And I love that you coach people in that way. It is good. It's
and
cool.
that's how we learn about ourselves. And I also like what you were saying, Melissa, about like you can give anyone an hour of your time and just see. What I like to tell my clients often that are fatiguing from the apps is, if you can think about it as 45 minutes of your life to go out there, try a new cocktail or a new bubble tea or a fabulous meal, meet someone you've never met. And even if you're just thinking about it as maybe it is either going to be a surprising connection or a hilarious story, because the worst dates are really good stories. And in fact, I forgot to tell you this. I'm collecting behind the scenes. People are writing to me about all sorts of amazingly horrifying bad dates.
Wow. Oh my gosh, I can't wait to write to you.
Oh my gosh.
Is that chapter?
It's like right there. And I realize like there might be something sociopathic about me, but I love hearing about bad dates almost as much as good dates. But
you know what? I'd rather hear about a bad date than a good date at this point from like my best friends, because I'm like, oh, of course they liked you. You're great. Tell me why they didn't like you, because I'm dying.
You're fabulous. But I know. And also I think just the whole point that's how we learn about ourselves and what we're into and what we're not into, by seeing what it feels like, this vibe scientist that you're talking about. What is that energy, which I love.
I feel, Melissa, like we could talk to you for hours and hours and hours about this, and I have a million more questions. But I am kind of curious, as we might want to wrap up this particular episode, like what advice do you have for people who are looking to date or go to a matchmaker or go to a dating event?
Oh, yeah.
I would say that, I want this to come out as loving as possible, but and I even touched on it already, any barrier that you currently have, I'm still going to see that as a matchmaker, right? So I'll reference myself once again. Sometimes I think like if I was 20 pounds thinner, I would probably attract way hotter, way better guys that I would be way more into. But after a while, like that thought process manifests. And so it's like, if a date goes bad, my head says it went bad because I'm too chubby, so
everything about that.
Right. However, it's like, if that's what's in your mind, then that's what it is, right? If it was, you know what, we just didn't really get along very well, then that's what it is. So my best advice is, if you're not feeling like you're really in a place where you're in love with yourself, you're not going to let somebody else love you the way you need to be loved. So, just dialing back, if somebody says, I'm not exactly where I want to be right now, that's a totally different conversation. That's almost like, are you sure you want to do this right now then? Right. Because you're still going to have all those problems, but the way you're able to digest them and work with them and sit with the discomfort and then still get out there, that's going to make a difference between somebody seeing you as an amazing partner or just like dead weight, or like somebody boring who always says the same thing over and over. Like, oh, too bad. You think everybody hates you. Well, they don't. So find a new narrative.
So here's another question, and maybe this is the difference between therapy and matchmaking, or is there any, I feel like everyone needs to be in therapy when they're trying to figure this out, because what is the difference between saying you need to be fully formed before you're ready to date versus just go out there, you're going to learn about yourself along the way, but nobody is, you don't need to feel like, okay, now I'm a complete, perfect person.
Right.
But you do need self-esteem, and you do need to not be insecure, I think.
Right, and I think that's where it comes in to say, I'm perfectly incomplete, but I'm happy with where I'm at in this moment.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, so you can go out on a date and know, like, there's so many areas where I can grow, but the right person is going to foster an environment where I feel comfortable to grow.
And they're going to kind of cherish me as I am, even though there's room to grow. So I don't have to be a complete person. If
you're coming from a mind space of like, I'm like, why would anyone want to date me? Don't go on a date. You don't have to be perfectly complete and perfectly whole. You can know that you have flaws, but you know what? If you're saying things to yourself like, I'm not going to bring value to anyone's life, that's when you should not get out there. Like take a minute, maybe connect with your friends, maybe then like go to therapy. But you can be incomplete. You just can't be Eeyore about it, I guess.
Well, and I think there's two things about that. One is we all have insecurities, right? We all have things that we would change about ourselves if we had a magic wand, which I don't encourage, because we are who we are and our world has brought us to where we are. But I think readiness, that word ready kind of hit me a little bit, because I think a lot of people feel like, I want to go out there, I want to have fun, I feel like I should be dating, I'm 35 years old or whatever it is. And I think people need to be ready. And I think people need to be psychologically and otherwise ready to really be vulnerable and be honest and be forthright and transparent about the process.
Yeah. And I would say, like, one of those litmus tests you can use, like, am I ready? Just ask yourself the question, am I mature enough to send a text message afterwards that says, hey, I had a fun time, I wasn't really feeling it, but you're awesome. It's like if you get the ick thinking about having to say to somebody that you're not ready to date them if they're interested in dating you, then maybe you have a little bit more inventory to take. You have to be adult enough to be like, yo, you were great, I'm really great, but you're not great for me, and vice versa.
Melissa, I absolutely love that litmus test. I think it's really phenomenal, because it's really hard for people to do something that they think will harm someone else. A little bit of twinge of codependency and avoidance in all of us.
Yeah.
Melissa, this has been a tremendous thrill. I'm so glad that nurse at the Hudson emergency room put us together.
I know. Thank you, Jenna.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel so lucky that you got your
That I got injured.
almost punched out of your
That's
face,
right.
and here we are.
You know what? That's how you can look at everything. Like every seemingly, or what do they call it? Every step back? Like it's not always a step back. Like we just
it's a
took
detour.
several steps forward. Yeah.
I like the flip of your hair with it.
Yeah.
That was really well done.
That's the only reason I don't cut my hair. It's like I have to use it as an accessory.
I know. Believe me, I understand. It's the only reason I've failed 5 times to get contact lenses put in is because I desperately just want to hold on to the glasses as an accessory, I think.
They're beautiful.
That's
part of the deal.
Melissa, we're so grateful to you. Will you tell people where they can find you? Plug anything you want to plug.
Okay. Well, you can text me direct. No, just kidding. Don't. You can find me on Instagram. I'm at the_MLR for my initials. And then on TikTok, I'm also at the_MLR. And my TikTok is only dating stuff, so that's fun. And then Instagram, I am private, but don't worry. If you want to follow me, I'll just make sure you're not a bot, and like we'll vibe on social media.
Score.
Love it. Love it.
Melissa, thanks again for everything. Absolutely.
Yes, thank you guys. I had so much fun.